changing world of news. Headlines that you wake up to. News that shapes your day. Stories that matter to you.
Good evening and welcome to World Today, our show on DD India, which is your daily window to the world. I'm Amritpal Singh. On the show tonight, we'll talk about what is transpiring in the talks on the nuclear deal with Iran, and also we'll be talking about how the new variant of the virus, of the coronavirus that has emerged, and how the world is planning to deal with it. What are the issues that the world is facing? But first, let's take a look at the headlines we are tracking at this hour. Centre takes stock of the situation in view of emergence of the new variant Omicron. Health Secretary chairs a meeting of stakeholders. Government stresses against lowering the guard, advises states to ramp up testing for early identification and early management. Omicron variant puts the world on alert. Poland joins the list of nations imposing bans on the incoming foreign nationals from countries at risk. WHO says Omicron COVID variant poses very high global risk. US President tries to soothe nerves, says the new variant is a cause of concern and not a cause of panic. At the strike of midnight, a new republic is born to the cheers of hundreds in Bridgetown as Barbados sheds the last vestiges of colonialism and becomes a republic, removes Britain's Queen Elizabeth as the head of state. Queen Elizabeth's royal standard lowered in presence of Prince Charles. European, Iranian and Russian diplomats sound upbeat as Iran and world powers hold their first talks in 5 months in Vienna on Monday to try and save the 2015 nuclear deal. The meeting in Vienna ends after a long hiatus triggered by election in June of Ebrahim Raisi, an anti-Western hardliner. Badminton star PV Sindhu to lead the Indian contingent in the BWF World Tour finals from Wednesday. Kadambi Srikanth and Lakshya Sen also opened the front in the men's section. Those were the headlines we were tracking at this hour, and let's begin with the big news we are tracking at this hour. Let's begin by taking a look at the updates on COVID-19 from across the world. COVID-19 cases swiftly soar across the world. So far, the world has registered over 26 crore 25 lakh cases of the disease, while the number of recoveries stand above 23 crore 71 lakh. More than 52 lakh 28,000 lives have been lost globally due to the pandemic. The US continues to remain the worst affected with COVID-19. The country has registered more than 4 crore 93 lakh cases of the disease, with the death toll surpassing 8 lakh. Meanwhile, European countries have again been witnessing a boom in the COVID-19 cases, with UK registering the highest number of cases in the continent. The country has more than 1 crore 1 lakh cases of COVID-19, followed by France that has over 76 lakh 28,000 cases. Germany trails behind France, registering more than 58 lakh 25,000 cases, while Italy has been seeing a spike where the number of cases stand above 50 lakh. And Union Health Secretary Rajesh Bhushan held a review meeting with the states today regarding the Omicron variant of the coronavirus. Let's take a look at the key points that have emerged from the meeting. Well, the centre has reiterated the nation can't let its guard down at this crucial moment. The focus should remain on timely testing and early identification of infected persons. And the centre has stressed on ensuring adequate health infrastructure and to be ready for the Omicron challenge. Another point that was stressed was that home isolation is to be supervised properly to avoid any lapses. And also the centre has underlined the need to maintain the infrastructure supply for essential drugs. Har Ghar Dastak campaign shall be continued till the 31st of December. This was decided in the meeting. And this campaign will focus on 100% first dose and completing the backlog of the second dose vaccination. It's also now clear that the Omicron variant does not, let me reiterate, does not escape the RT-PCR and RAT test. Earlier it was being said that it escapes the test, it doesn't get detected, but now it has been made clear that it does not escape the test. The centre has advised the states to ramp up testing for early identification of positive cases and early management. And speaking on the issue in Rajya Sabha, the Union Health and Family Welfare Minister Mansukh Mandviya said that the government is seized of the matter and every possible effort is being undertaken to keep the nation safe and secure.
वेरिएंट अभी दुनिया के 14 कंट्री में पाया गया है और यहाँ उसका अभ्यास हो रहा है। इंडिया में अभी उसका कोई केस रिपोर्ट नहीं हुआ है, लेकिन दुनिया में जिस तरह से इस वायरस के संदर्भ में हमें सूचना मिली है उसको देखते हुए एक एडवाइजरी भी डिक्लेयर की गई है। पोर्ट पर हमने भी देखरेख रखना शुरू कर दिया है। कोई भी ऐसे संदिग्ध केस है तो उसको तुरंत ही चेक करके उसको जीनोमिक सीक्वेंसेस भी करा रहे हैं और आज के दिन में सारे प्रिकॉशन को लेने की आवश्यकता है, क्योंकि कोविड क्राइसिस के दरमियान हमने बहुत कुछ सीखा है। आज हमारे पास बहुत कुछ संसाधन भी अवेलेबल है, सारी लेबोरेटरी भी अवेलेबल है, कोई भी कैसी भी स्थिति को हम देख सकते हैं।
And former English cricketer Kevin Peterson lauded India's support to countries affected in Africa who are dealing with the Omicron variant, including by supplies of made-in-India vaccines. In his tweet, he thanked Prime Minister and appreciated the move. And let's take a look at what Kevin Peterson tweeted. Kevin Peterson in a tweet thanked the Prime Minister. And yesterday, if you remember, that the government of India had said that it stands ready to support countries affected in Africa in dealing with the Omicron variant, including by supplies of made-in-India vaccines. The supplies can be undertaken through the COVAX facility or bilaterally. In this regard, the government cleared all orders placed so far by COVAX for supply of Covishield vaccines, including to African countries like Malawi, Ethiopia, Zambia, Mozambique, Guinea, Lesotho, and the government also cleared supplies of Covaxin to Botswana. Any new requirement projected either bilaterally or through COVAX, the government said, will be considered expeditiously. And the GI of the Government of India made it stand clear that it stands ready to supply essential life-saving drugs, test kits, gloves, PPE kits, medical equipment such as ventilators, etc., or other requirements as the countries require. And the Australian authorities said on Tuesday that an international traveller who was most likely affected by the Omicron variant has spent time in the community as officials rush to track the person's close contacts and locations visited. New South Wales health officials said initially testing strongly indicates that the traveller who arrived in Sydney last week before the latest border restrictions had been infected with the Omicron variant of the virus. The report about the new probable community case comes ahead of a meeting of Australia's National Cabinet, a group of federal and state leaders on Tuesday to review measures aimed at limiting the spread of the variant. If confirmed, the total number of cases infected with the new variant in Australia will rise to 6. All other cases have been in quarantine and are asymptomatic or display very mild symptoms. Meanwhile, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison on Tuesday said he would urge state leaders to proceed with plans to open the internal borders by Christmas. And Australian Health Minister Greg Hunt informed about putting pause on the next phase of international arrivals till December 15th. The decision was taken out of an abundance of caution and in view of the emerging variant.
We'll put a pause on the next phase of international arrivals, which would have commenced on the 1st of December. In particular, those arrivals with regards to the students and working visas and other related categories, which were going to commence on the 1st of December, will now commence on the 15th of December. We're doing this out of an abundance of caution, but our overwhelming view is that whilst it's an emerging variant, it's a manageable variant.
And the World Health Organization's Director General joined the world leaders, German Chancellor Angela Merkel and Chilean President Sebastián Piñera, for a long-planned and virtual special session of the UN Health Agency's member states at the World Health Assembly. WHO Director General said that emergence of the highly mutated Omicron variant underlines the perilous and precarious situation globally. Tedros, the WHO chief, added that many uncertainties remain about just how transmissible and severe infection by the highly mutated Omicron variant might be. Meanwhile, G7 health ministers held an urgent meeting to discuss developments with regard to concerns related to the Omicron variant and praised the exemplary work of South Africa in both detecting the variant and alerting others to it. Ministers are also committed to continue to work closely together with WHO and international partners to share information and monitor Omicron. Britain has decided it will offer COVID-19 booster shots to all adults in a bid to accelerate its vaccination program amid concerns over the new Omicron virus variant. Health Minister Sajid Javid said that the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunization will review the booster program to reduce the gap between the second doses and the boosters.
The JCVI, the government's independent expert advisors on vaccinations, to urgently review how we could expand the program and whether we should reduce the gap between second doses and boosters. The JCVI published its advice in the last hour. First, it advised that the minimum dose interval for booster jabs should be halved from 6 months to 3 months. Second, that the booster program should be expanded to include all remaining adults aged 18 and above. That children aged between 12 and 15 should be given a second dose 12 weeks from the first dose.
And in an attempt to curb the spread of the new variant, face coverings will be compulsory in shops and on public transport in England. Javid announced that changes will be made on self-isolation rules.
We've announced measures to slow the spread of the virus here in the UK. We're making changes to our rules on self-isolation for close contacts in England to reflect the greater threat that may be posed by this new variant. So close contacts of anyone who tests positive with a suspected case of Omicron must self-isolate for 10 days, regardless of whether they have been vaccinated or not.
President Joe Biden reassured that the United States was prepared to handle the new COVID-19 Omicron variant and pledged to accelerate development of vaccines to handle. Biden said that the new variant is a cause of concern and not a cause for panic. He added that any new detailed strategy will be put forward by Thursday with more widespread vaccinations and testing.
Protection. I know you're tired of hearing me say this. The best protection against this new variant or any of the variants out there, the ones we've been dealing with already, is getting fully vaccinated and getting a booster shot. Most Americans are fully vaccinated, but not yet boosted. If you're 18 years or over and got fully vaccinated before June the 1st, go get the booster shot today. Fully vaccinated booster person is the most protected against COVID. Do not wait. Go get your booster if it's time for you to do so. And if you are not vaccinated, now's the time to get vaccinated and take your children to be vaccinated.
And U.S. President Biden also said that the White House is working with vaccine makers Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson to develop contingency plans to handle the new strain.
Daily vaccinations or boosters are needed to respond to this new variant. We will accelerate their development and deployment with every available tool. I want to reiterate, Dr. Fauci believes that the current vaccines provide at least some protection against the new variant, and the boosters strengthen that protection significantly. We do not yet believe that additional measures will be needed, but so that we are prepared if needed. My team is already working with officials at Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson to develop contingency plans for vaccines or boosters if needed.
And for more on that, I'm joined by Dr. Raman R. Ganga Khedkar. He's the Dr. C.G. Pant National Chair of the ICMR. Dr. Ganga Khedkar, the U.S. President says it should remain a variant of concern and not a variant for panic. Many countries in the world are shutting down and saying, well, we're not allowing international travel. The fact of the matter is also that it's barely 7 days or a week old, and it's already in 14 countries around the world. But there is also another fact: no deaths have taken place. There are conflicting views. WHO itself is not very clear on how transmissible it is. They are not very clear on how severe it is, how virulent is it. How concerned should we, the common citizens, be about it?
One thing which all of us must remember, these are very early days. The number of cases continue to be just under 1,000. There are conflicting reports that are emerging not only from South Africa, from different sources. So credible piece of information is still not available. Neither WHO has that kind of access nor others. So essentially, what is happening is we are speculating at this juncture, looking at the reports of genomic changes or mutations that have been observed. But one good part, as we understand, is even if the variant may be highly transmissible, the variant doesn't increase the hospitalization as much, nor the deaths have increased dramatically in South Africa, even in the Gauteng province that we talk about. Now the issue that tends to come up is, what should we be doing? Should we panic or should we become extra cautious? You don't need any extra precaution. What we need to understand is we should assume, which we have been told every time, that the virus is very much here. Whether it is a variant, whether it is a Delta variant that is already there in India, we need to protect ourselves from getting even infection from Delta. Omicron is not going to be any way different. All those who are vaccinated must take all those who are not vaccinated must take vaccine. Those who have taken only one dose of vaccine, you need to take the second dose of vaccine. This will ensure that even if you get infected, hospitalization may not occur, death as one of the adverse outcomes will not occur. And those who have received vaccines more often than not, they tend to feel that I don't need to worry about new infection. We don't know much about Omicron variant. Therefore, we need to understand that we don't want this variant to enter in our bodies. And this is very much feasible because the precautions do not change whether it is Delta variant or Omicron variant. We need to continue to adhere to COVID appropriate behavior, the masking related issues, safe distance, the ventilation related component, and these are not different. So to me, we have to just understand one thing: coronavirus is very much here in this in the world. It is likely to infect all of us, whether it is Omicron or Delta. We don't want that infection to hurt our bodies. So the best is ensure that you are vaccinated and ensure that you don't die due to this infection or get hospitalized, and ensure that newer variants don't enter your body by wearing masks and following other COVID appropriate behavior.
Okay. So, Dr. Ganga Khedkar, you are saying, follow the good old principles of following the COVID protocols, wear your mask, cover your face, do not go out unnecessarily, or unless absolutely essential, don't go to crowded places, keep social distancing. All that is very well. But Dr. Gangakhetkar, you know, when things open up, remember the days when the lockdown was put. We all were so scared that we weren't, you know, stepping out of our homes. Then we got sick of it. The economy went down. One understood things. Life needs to move on. You know, the government opened it up. Then the seriousness in people goes. So how do we as a society ensure that we bring that as part of our behavior, because this virus thing is not going away, it's just mutating, it's getting new names and coming up with more versions of itself or variants of itself, whether or not they are virulent enough, but it's here to stay.
Absolutely. You know, there is one thing which we will have to do is we will have to create opinion leaders, make people responsible for their own health and their family's health. We must also understand that even if I take a vaccine is going to protect me against hospitalization and death, but infections could occur. If infections again occur, because these are first generation vaccines, I might take those viruses back to my home or workplaces and perhaps pass it off to somebody who could be my friend and he is vulnerable. So each one of us has to have one task in mind, that we try to make the best effort to convince those who are not vaccinated that you need to take vaccine. They need to ensure that they take the second dose. And I think the way we have handled so far, no, we are still better off. One simple issue that we need to understand, that would we see a major outbreak occurring in India very soon? Perhaps not, because we have started vaccination picked up sometime at the end of the summer. So essentially, even vaccines continue to remain protective. There will be no drops of neutralizing antibody titers. And what is also important is Delta wave infected so many that you would perhaps have a protection that may last for a longer period of time. But we have to use this particular period to ensure that everybody in the society is vaccinated, everybody uses the COVID appropriate behavior. If we do that, we will still be better off. So my appeal would be one simple, that we need to have good communication strategy, but at the same time, each one of us has to believe in two things. One, that until the time you still hear about coronavirus affecting or increasing in different parts of the world, we need to believe that we are citizens of a global village. We are still threatened.
Okay.
So we need to change our attitude, and we need to believe that I would be vulnerable, and all the infections that could of Omicron, and I don't need to worry about Omicron, but I don't want Omicron to come inside my body, and that's very, very easily feasible.
Okay. So what you're arguing is that vaccination is the key, that, you know, I may be young or I may have, you know, more immunity, but if I get it passed on to me, I may not go to the hospital, I may not die, but I can pass it on to my old parents, to my little children who are friends with comorbidities, and I'm putting their health at risk. But Professor Gangakhetkar, you know, we were playing the American president's bite a little while back, where he said that go get yourself a booster dose. He's telling the Americans that they have a lot of vaccines. We are also doing great in terms of the pace of our vaccination, but our population is so huge that it will take some time before we vaccinate all our population. How important are the booster doses? And what is your sense, that would it come to India, would it not, would the government allow it, would it allow it for sections of society like healthcare workers, frontline workers? What is the thinking?
No, there is one thing which we also need to remember. Taking a decision to give boosters, as some of the countries have done, is to my mind little premature. Because you are not going to be in a position to provide boosters every 2 months or 3 months. The way things are appearing, when it comes to development of escape mutants or variants of this kind, which are suspected to be escape mutants. Now, in those circumstances, one has to keep in the mind that the vaccine that we have developed so far is perhaps based on Wuhan virus, the earliest sequences that we had. And now, if we find that Omicron variant is likely to evade immune response, instead of taking the old vaccine, perhaps we would like to ensure that people receive vaccine based on the newer variants that have been observed, so that you would have a lasting protection that might occur. And if that is the case, we may have to only provide boosters for those who are likely to be non-responders to the vaccine or poor responders to the vaccine, like those who are older people, those who have immunodeficiency due to certain other chronic morbidities that they may be having, which I am sure the government will essentially decide and say yes to that part.
Okay.
But for everybody, I think the prudent thing would be that you protect yourself from not getting the infection by adhering to COVID appropriate behavior, and then whenever such a vaccine comes out, which is based on newer variants.
So we'll cross we'll cross the bridge when we come to it. Dr. Ganga Khedkar, there's one question I really wish to ask you, because a lot of people ask me, and I'm sure this is asked to you many times, but for this benefit of my viewers, that those people who argue that, well, I've already been COVID positive, I've acquired immunity through infection, why should I go in for vaccination? What do you answer to them?
One must remember one thing, this is an abundant precaution that we take by ensuring that you are providing vaccine even to those who were infected earlier.
Yes.
And a precaution, as long as it is not going to hurt our body, and in the best probabilities that we understand, it is going to create what we call as hybrid immunity. And what do we mean by hybrid immunity? You are getting immunity, immune protection from natural infection by providing additional vaccine. You are also doing something like a booster that is provided to them, and this together, vaccine induced immunity and immunity that is established by natural infection, will be far more stronger than what one could imagine. And therefore, there is no harm. One has to take the vaccine because it is going to be more protective compared to only one that you may provide, either immunity through natural infection or immunity coming through vaccination. So essentially, it is a good thing. It's an abundant precaution. And in any case, we get life once. One more jab, if it is going to protect your life, you will lead a full life, then why we should not take it is a question which we should ask to ourselves.
Dr. Ganga Khedkar, is it settled now? Because I think the government is now saying, well, this new variant Omicron does not escape the RAT and the RT-PCR detection test. Is it a settled question? Because, there were reports that, well, it evades or detection by the PCR test.
There is one thing which we have to distinguish. When I take RT-PCR test, there are 3 genes which are being picked up in RT-PCR test. Of these 3, if any 2 come out as positive, my test is called as positive. Okay. Now, in this case, the spike protein has undergone 32 mutations, and therefore what is going to happen is the other 2 genes will pick up somebody who is positive. Spike protein may not come as positive. So essentially, what does it mean? The person who is RT-PCR positive will come out as RT-PCR positive, but if I have to find out whether he has Omicron variant, then I need to look at the 3rd gene, that is spike protein. If 2 genes are positive and spike gene is not positive, then in those cases it may be something which is closer to Omicron, and therefore genomic sequencing to find out whether it is Omicron can be done. So what essentially, if I was to summarize, the current tests that we use are unlikely to miss the case as COVID positive case or COVID RT-PCR positive case. However, to establish that this is infection due to Omicron, we may have to look at the S gene and also follow it up. Those S gene dropouts should be tested by genomic sequencing, which the government is doing as of now.
Okay, so the RT-PCR and the RAT are good to go. Dr. Gangakhat Khedkar, is there enough data available with the scientific community to ascertain with a certain degree of assurance that the Omicron, the currently available vaccines work for Omicron, or does Omicron variant are those vaccines not effective for Omicron?
Currently, that data is not available. All the statements that we by and large are making essentially are speculative. The reason is very simple. The infection was reported just recently, and in order to find out whether the vaccine will work or not, you need to culture the virus, and the culture of virus itself requires 3 weeks period. So the data is not available is a truth. You will receive this kind of report of whatever is being seen in labs within perhaps another 2 weeks time. Until then, we have to assume that this could pose challenges for vaccines. But would that challenge be one of its own kind, that the protection would be completely lost? That is not going to happen, because it's only 32 mutations that have been seen. There would be vaccine's effect. The vaccine, even if the vaccine doesn't work, there may be a small decrease in the efficacy of this vaccine in terms of protection from getting infection. Therefore, it is important that all of us must take these vaccines urgently, presuming that Omicron is likely to hit us pretty soon. That would be the best way to deal with it, rather than thinking that I will do this only when there are reports of Omicron occurring in India. I think there is no point in losing time. Just take what is available, follow the same old basic precautions. It is still something which we can fight with without much botheration.
All right. Dr. Ganga Khedkar, many thanks for so comprehensively explaining and dealing with this issue. Thank you very much for being on the show tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
And moving on, European, Iranian and Russian diplomats sounded upbeat as Iran and the world powers held their first talks in 5 months in Vienna on Monday to try and save the 2015 nuclear deal. The meeting in Vienna ended a longer hiatus triggered by the election in June of Ibrahim Raisi, an anti-Western hardliner. The talks are effectively indirect negotiations between Tehran and Washington, and other officials shuttling between them.
After a 5-month pause, talks with Iran finally resumed. Talks have begun to prevent the collapse of a nuclear deal in Vienna. Officials are discussing the possible return of the US to the 2015 accord. Representatives from China, Russia, France, Germany, Britain and Iran restarted the long-delayed talks over the nuclear deal, formerly known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, at the Place Coburg Hotel in Vienna, Austria on Monday, to try to revive the 2015 deal, with indirect involvement from the United States.
In this meeting, we emphasized that the main reason for the current situation is the action of the country that violated the agreement and the Security Council resolution by exiting the agreement and reimposed past sanctions and introduced new sanctions while violating international law.
The European Union's official chairing the Iran talks said that he was positive after the first discussions in Vienna with the new Iranian negotiators, whom he said had shown a desire to engage seriously.
I feel extremely positive about what I have seen today in the Joint Commission. There is clearly a will to engage. There is clearly a will on all the delegations to listen to the Iranian positions brought by the new team, and there is clearly a will of the Iranian delegation to engage in serious work and bring JCPOA back to life. So I feel positive that we can be doing important things for the next weeks to come.
Israel has urged world leaders to keep up pressure on Iran and not lift sanctions as part of nuclear negotiations.
A nuclear Iran will thrust the entire Middle East into a nuclear arms race. We will find ourselves in a new Cold War, but this time the bomb will be in the hands of religious fanatics who are engaged in terrorism as a way of life. The world must prevent this, and it can prevent this. Tighter sanctions, tighter supervision, conduct any talks from a position of strength.
Iran's atomic advances are raising doubt as to whether a breakthrough can be made to bring Tehran and the United States back into full compliance with the accord. Since the United States, under the then-President Donald Trump, withdrew from the deal in 2018, Iran has breached many of its restrictions designed to lengthen the time needed to generate enough fissile material for a nuclear bomb to at least a year, from 2 to 3 months, the so-called breakout time. Iran says it only wants to enrich uranium for civil uses. The deal restricts the purity to which Iran can enrich uranium to 3.67%, far below the roughly 90% that is weapons grade, or the 20% Iran reached before the deal. Iran is now enriching at various levels, the highest being around 60%. The deal also says Iran can only produce or accumulate enriched uranium with just over 5,000 of its least efficient first-generation centrifuges at one facility. Will the deadlock end anytime soon? Remains to be seen. Bureau Report, World Today Desk, DD India.
And to discuss that, I'm joined by Kamar Agha, Strategic and Foreign Affairs expert, who's joining me on the show now. Kamar, the talks have resumed. There is a change in administrations on both in Washington, D.C. and Tehran. Should one be hopeful of what one sees at Vienna, or is it just another attempt to resume which might not work, because really the two principles in the issue have not seceded any positions of theirs?
Because European Union statement is quite positive. They believe, because all the parties are serious and they want some sort of settlement. Of course, in this round of negotiation, I don't expect any major breakthrough. But ultimately, yes, I'm quite sure, I'm quite hopeful. The reason is, Iran wants sanctions to be lifted, and the Western nation wants, Iran to give up its nuclear ambitions. Secondly, nobody wants war in the region, and Iran, is...
Kamar, I'm going to stop you for a moment. I'm sorry, we have to cut down to a live press conference the Chief Economic Advisor is now holding. Kamar, we'll try and come back to you.
Period from 2015 to 19 has been higher for India than for China, in each one of these three metrics, which is the growth in manufacturing gross value added, the growth in merchandise exports, and the growth in manufactured goods exports. I think that is something which is very important that we must take into account. This has not been the case in any of the previous periods. We're showing you the 2005 to 2010 and 2010 to 2015 5-year periods as well, where India clearly lagged behind on these metrics, compared to China. But now on growth, India has surged ahead. So I think it's important also that, to take into account here that each of these three periods, India's base is lower compared to China for sure. So we are actually doing an apples to apples comparison, and the fact that the growth rates have been higher in this 5-year period is something that is noteworthy. And if you look at the sectoral patterns, you see iron and steel, you look at chemicals, machinery, and others. These are sectors where the growth, the CAGR has been much higher for India compared to China. So this is something which is an emerging story, and I think policy has played a very important role in enabling it. but going forward, we expect even more vibrancy to come, from this. This is, I think, the start of possible good news on manufacturing, based on data that we have till 2015 to 2019. As I said clearly, and if you look at the reasons why this has happened as well, on the left side you see the national highway length, because logistics costs are a very important determinant of the overall competitiveness and the overall costs of manufacturing firms. So the national highway length has increased significantly. Power, which is the other important input, into manufacturing, peak energy deficit has gone down significantly. So power has become far more reliable, and reliability or lack of uncertainty or certainty in power and logistics costs makes a big difference to the overall manufacturing as well. So these are two key inputs: logistics and and power. If you similarly look at the average distance covered by trucks per day and the number of highways, number of lanes in national highways, those have also improved significantly over the last 10-year period. Similarly, if you look at the turnaround, major ports turnaround time, if you look at over the last decade, clearly improvement. So I think the important message that comes through here is that what you are seeing in this particular chart, the first chart in manufacturing, is because of the focus on several systematic factors that have actually hobbled Indian manufacturing: power costs, logistics costs, cost of capital, etc. And these are improving, I think, which is something which is very important for us to take into account when we think about the growth going forward. This has happened actually. Similarly, the tax rate cut has also made India very competitive compared to other jurisdictions, and that is also something that has helped in this aspect. So clearly, this is just to summarize the manufacturing sector growth. There's been critical policy support to strengthen physical infrastructure, to boost productivity and bolster global competitiveness. The integration of GST and FASTag has actually enabled this. Competitive tax rates have also enabled. Together with that, the labor reforms that have been done and the change in MSME definitions, the PLI scheme, all of these will also add to these effects that have already manifested. And so we can expect as these reforms are actually carried through, the impact of that on the manufacturing sector should be felt going forward. So to summarize, in terms of the growth outlook going forward, firstly, hysteresis is something that is quite unlikely, because the formal sector has emerged very well from the crisis. Informal sector, even though it has been impacted, the nature of its production means that it will be less impacted by by hysteresis. Second, financial sector, which is very important for in providing funding for investment, has actually emerged stronger from the crisis. And finally, and this is very important in terms of the policy push, manufacturing sector, there are clear signs in the data on the outcomes and the causal factors, which is your logistics costs, your power costs, etc. Reduction in those is contributing to these outcomes. So I think when you start putting these together, I think that clearly can lead us to believe that India, this decade, should actually have good growth going forward. And that is what, so our team here has actually done an estimation of the potential GDP, the impact on investment, the impact on the productivity, and thereby what will be the growth going forward, in the decade. So we've considered various different scenarios, a baseline scenario which has inflation at 4%, that's the deflator at 4%, which is the midpoint of that 2 to 6% range. Investments good inflation has been taken as the median of the past 2 decades. The sectoral investment scenarios actually we've factored in increase in the manufacturing share, and that is because of the important policy push and the change that has already manifested with services declining a little bit because manufacturing gains. Services actually will increase in nominal terms and actually in rupee terms, but share will go down as manufacturing actually increases a little bit. Buoyancy of net taxes, because this estimation is being done as GDP plus equal to GVA plus taxes minus subsidies. So that buoyancy has been taken at 1.2. The growth in nominal investment has been taken at the median, not very ambitious at all, at just the median for the last 2 decades. And the incremental output capital ratio increases to the 60th percentile for manufacturing because of the aspects that I already showed, and in mining sectors because of the reform. For all the other sectors, the incremental output capital ratio, which is a measure of productivity, remains at its median value. That's the baseline scenario, but there are other scenarios as well which should manifest the impact of the reforms that have been done. There are three optimistic scenarios that have been factored in. One where there is only a change in productivity, so the incremental output capital ratio for all sectors increases to the 60th percentile, not very large, just an increase from 50th to 60th percentile. The optimistic investment scenario is where the growth in investment increases to the 60th percentile rate of growth. And another optimistic scenario where both investment and productivity go up to the 60th percentile. I must mention that this analysis is motivated by a lot of evidence that has been provided in the last 3 surveys, that savings is actually not as much of a constraint for investment because savings pro-cyclically responds to growth. I would request those that are interested to refer to the 2018-19 economic survey and this year's economic survey chapter 2, 2018-19 survey chapter 1 and chapter 2 in this survey, if they are interested in finding out the micro assumptions that actually is leading us to project investment rather than savings, because of the pro-cyclical movement in savings, that we've shown clearly evidence of in these surveys. There's a pessimistic scenario that has been built as well, which is the COVID hangover leading to the incremental output capital ratio falling to 25th percentile in the informal sector. So clearly, as you can see, we've taken a more impactful scenario when we are considering the pessimistic case compared to the optimistic ones, where we are only moving from 50th to 60th percentile, but in the pessimistic, we're actually taking it from 50th to 25th percentile only for the informal sector, because as I've clearly shown the evidence, the formal sector has emerged very well from the pandemic. And the no COVID scenario, which is just the counterfactual, if COVID had not happened, what would have been the growth rate that is taken as the average of the growth rates of the previous 3 years, FY 18, 19, and 2020. Based on that, we actually have various different scenarios. In the baseline, which is actually the black chart here, growth over this decade will be 7% plus, will increase a little bit, start hitting close to 8%, a little more than 8% in subsequent years. That's the baseline. In more optimistic scenarios, growth will actually be higher and will ramp up even faster compared to the baseline, while in the pessimistic scenario, growth starts at about 6.5% and then increases to a little more than 7%, while the no COVID scenario growth remains, actually that's the average, that is basically just taken as mechanical. So clearly, given the dynamics that I've highlighted, which is the absence of hysteresis, financial sector emerging well, manufacturing growth happening, and the policy emphasis on reforms, second generation reforms, each one of which actually are focused on enhancing competitiveness in the in the factor market. The analysis shows that will have an impact on growth as going forward as well. Let me summarize then the outlook. India is likely to have double-digit growth in this year. The overall growth for the first half has been 13.7%, so even a little more than 6% growth in the subsequent quarters should be able to deliver double-digit growth for this year. And thereafter 7% plus over different scenarios. I think the impact of seminal second generation reforms will unfold in terms of both investment and in productivity going forward, and that is what we've shown using the potential growth estimations. And I think finally this is a concern that, given that we are still amidst the pandemic and the Omicron variant, the variant seems to have actually created some concern. I think that we are all waiting for evidence to come on how infectious would it be and how debilitating would it be as well compared to the Delta variant. If we look at the research that's been done on pandemics, typically as a virus, mutates to become an endemic, typically the infectivity increases, but the virulence does, but the devastation that it creates in terms of mortality, hospitalizations, and serious cases typically does go down. But I think that is something which we cannot latch on to, because evidence on this still has to come through. There is research, or there is statements being given by doctors on both sides. There is a South African doctor who's basically said that it may not be that bad, but there are others who are actually pointing out that maybe they don't agree with that assessment. So I think this is something that we'll have to wait, which then means that we all have to continue following the COVID protocols, till we are out of this. We are not out of it till we are actually out of it. With that, I would like to thank you all for not only today, but for the entire education. This will be my conference as the Chief Economic Advisor. From the bottom of my heart, I want to thank each one of you for being so cooperative and actually helping us carry our messages on the, during a very important phase of the Indian economy and the global economy. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Now we will open the floor for questions. First, I am calling Ajay Mishra from Doordarshan.
नमस्कार सर, हमेशा की तरह बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग और डिटेल्ड ये प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस रही जीडीपी के बाद, और भविष्य के लिए आपको बहुत शुभकामनाएं। आपने इस साल के लिए जो जीडीपी का ग्रोथ प्रोजेक्शन दिया है वो डबल डिजिट में दिया है। मैं चाहता हूं कि महंगाई दर को भी लेकर के आप इस पूरे साल के प्रोजेक्शन को हमसे साझा करें, और क्या अब हम ये माने कि जो फ्यूल प्राइसेस एक बड़ी चिंता का विषय थी, अब उसमें उतनी परेशानी की बात नहीं है। और दूसरी बात यह कि कोरोना पैंडेमिक के बाद जो भारत सरकार का फोकस मनरेगा जैसी योजनाओं पर रहा, तो गांव में वेजेस को लेकर के क्या स्थिति है, कि वहां पर चीजें बेहतर हुई हैं अगर ओवरऑल इकोनॉमिक सेंटिमेंट देखें?
अजीत जी, आप अपने प्रश्न का दूसरा भाग एक्चुअली दोबारा बोलेंगे, क्योंकि थोड़ा उसमें रुकावट आई थी। आप दोबारा बोलेंगे?
सर, मैं ये समझना चाह रहा था कि पैंडेमिक के बाद जब सरकार ने मनरेगा के ऊपर और जो गांव के ऊपर इतना फोकस किया, तो रूरल वेजेस पे क्या इम्पैक्ट पड़ा है, और वहां का जो इकोनॉमिक सिनेरियो है वो किस तरह से जीडीपी आंकड़ों में या आपकी दूसरे जो स्टडीज हैं उसमें रिफ्लेक्ट होता है सर? थैंक यू सर।
धन्यवाद। आपका पहला प्रश्न जो था इन्फ्लेशन के लिए था, क्योंकि ये एक विषय है जिसमें कि काफी चर्चा हो रही है, इसीलिए मैंने उस पे काफी ध्यान दिया। जैसे मैं बतला रहा था कि भारत की जो नीति है, भारत की नीति न सिर्फ डिमांड पे, सप्लाई पे भी हमने काफी ध्यान दिया है, और इसीलिए मैंने एक ठीक तरीके से समझाने के लिए कि जब सप्लाई हम बढ़ाते हैं तो उससे जो है जो कीमतें हैं वो उतनी नहीं बढ़ती, तो ये जो है हमें ध्यान में रखना है। इसलिए मैं ये भी दिखला रहा था कि यदि आप ध्यान दें, जब 2008 और 2009 में जब ग्लोबल फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस जब आई थी, उसमें जब हमने जिन नीतियों का अमल किया था, जिसमें सिर्फ डिमांड पे ध्यान दिया था, जिसके कारण जो है आपका जो महंगाई दर बहुत तेजी से बढ़ा था, डबल डिजिट इन्फ्लेशन में, और जैसे मैं आंकड़े दिखा रहा था 17% इन्फ्लेशन एक्चुअली जो हाईएस्ट 17% पे आया था। और ये इसलिए आया था क्योंकि जो तब की जो नीतियां थी, वही नीतियां आज बाकी देश भी अमल कर रही है। भारत इसमें
So that was Dr. K.V. Subramanian, Krishnamurthy Subramanian, the Chief Economic Advisor, addressing the media and trying to talk about the growth projections. Well, he said that the GDP at constant 2011-2012 prices in Q2 in the quarter 2 of 2021-22 is estimated at 35.73 lakh crores as against 32.97 lakh crores in quarter 2 2020 or 2021. That's the corroborating period last year. So he's addressing this press conference on that issue. Well, let's talk about Barbados now. At the strike of Monday midnight, the new republic Barbados was born to the cheers of hundreds of people lining the Chamberlain Bridge in capital Bridgetown. Take a look.
The moment for which Barbados waited for almost 400 years finally arrived At the strike of midnight, a new republic was finally born on Tuesday, and with this, Barbados became the world's newest republic. This new republic was born to the cheers of hundreds of people lining Chamberlain Bridge in the capital Bridgetown. Prime Minister Mia Mottley, the leader of Barbados's Republican movement, helped lead the ceremony. Mottley has won global attention by denouncing the effects of climate change on small Caribbean nations. Prince Charles, heir to the British throne, stood somberly as Queen Elizabeth's royal standard was lowered, and then came a new Barbados. 21 gun salute fired as the national anthem of Barbados was played over a crowded Hero Square.
Madam President, Prime Minister, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I was so deeply touched that you should have invited me to return to Barbados and to join you on behalf of the Queen at this moment of such significance for your remarkable nation. The creation of this republic offers a new beginning.
Possessing a clear sense of who we are and what we are capable of achieving, in the year 2021, we now turn our vessel's bow towards the new republic. We do this so that we may seize the full substance of our sovereignty.
A celebration including Barbadian music and dance began at 8 p.m. local time, with Maison inaugurated just after midnight, coinciding with Barbados Independence Day. Barbados ditched Britain's Queen Elizabeth as the head of the state, forging a new republic on November 30th with its first ever president and severing its last remaining colonial bonds nearly 400 years after the first English ships arrived at the Caribbean island. Barbadian singer Rihanna was declared a national hero by Prime Minister Mia Mottley, the leader of Barbados's Republican movement. Prime Minister Mia Mottley announced that the 33-year-old would be conferred with the honor of National Hero of Barbados to cheers. Rihanna was called up before the crowds to be congratulated by Mottley.
On behalf of a grateful nation, but an even prouder people, we therefore present to you the designee for National Hero of Barbados, Ambassador Robin Rihanna Fenty. May you continue to shine like a diamond.
Barbados will remain a republic within the Commonwealth, a grouping of 54 countries across Africa, Asia, the Americas, Europe and the Pacific. That has always been a priority for Elizabeth, who heads it. The English initially used white British indentured servants to toil on the plantations of tobacco, cotton, indigo and sugar, but Barbados in just a few decades became England's first truly profitable slave society. Barbados received 600,000 enslaved Africans between 1627 and 1833 who were put to work in the sugar plantations, earning fortunes for the English owners. More than 10 million Africans were shackled into the Atlantic slave trade by European nations between the 15th and the 19th centuries. Those who survived the often brutal voyage ended up toiling on plantations. While full freedom was finally granted in 1838, the plantation owners preserved considerable economic and political power might into the 20th century. The island gained full independence in 1966. With Bureau Inputs, World Today Desk, DD India.
Well, that's it then in World Today. Thanks for watching. Namaskar.